Andrew, just in terms of the critical success factor in our world, finding the right buyer, do you want to just talk through maybe some examples of where that's happening and that's happened in our world?
Yeah, sure, Rick. I think it's one of those things where I'm sure a lot of people on the call have spoken to multiple advisors or professionals in the space, that it seems so obvious, almost commoditized now. But it's so interesting that if you look at a traditional approach, there's typically a handful of buyers, whatever it may be, and a huge focus is on engineering the right transaction. Whereas we've learned over the last 10 or 15 years that if you get the right buyer or the right acquirer, you can sort out that transaction element. And it comes down to what is your definition of right. And I think that's, at the end of the day, the driver around synergies, what you want to do from a growth and exit perspective, an alignment of culture, and someone who's actually got money. And so I think that from that perspective, it's really key. And we see it, we're fortunate that in the majority of the transactions that we've closed recently are in the process of closing, the power of having the right buyer. And when we say that, you'll have one company and multiple people looking at this one company, and how one buyer just sees a whole different level of value. And I've got one real example now that we're hopefully about to go into ComCom, where we had multiple buyers at the table, 3 in fact, and literally on the same day, the one party came in with an offer at around 225 million rand for this business, which was probably a little bit low to what expectation was. And the successful bidder came in at 450 million for the exact same business, both coming out of the same industry. And what played out there was the fact that there was just alignment, that I could see the vision, that there was connection between the executive and the shareholders and the acquirer. And it just got an even rarer situation on one of your recent deals, which just proves the power of finding the right buyer.
And those who've chatted to us recently will have heard about a foundry called Primer out in the East Rand. It was a tough one. It's a big international market. They weren't really penetrating that much of the market. They had very lumpy revenue and lumpy profits. We were getting very little interest out of the local market. But we had built a list which included the whole market, what we thought was the whole market. We had a bit of resistance from our client about approaching this one party. We eventually got to them. We got them to tell us more about them, this crowd in Chile. When they presented their story to us, they had dots all over the world where they were present, but they had almost nothing in Africa, one little dot in Zambia. So that's when we knew there's a good chance they are the right buyer. And that was it. It was a long journey dealing with time zone and language getting in the way of doing a good deal. A phenomenal deal was done. But that was all about finding that one party in the world who was the right buyer for that business. And even when I met the chairman, when the deal closed in September last year, and I met the chairman of the acquirer, the first thing he said to me was, "How did you find us?" So it's just critical. And I think I've actually just been talking to some guys who've just been asking about how we function, how we work. You've got to start every project with a blank piece of paper and think strategically about where you're going to find that right buyer. Another great example, actually, Andrew, is the software business we're closing now. And I was in a meeting yesterday with the acquirer out of the UK. When it's the right acquirer, all problems get solved quite easily. When it's the wrong acquirer, it's hard to solve the problems. They just keep coming at you. And every time there's a problem, acquirer goes into their corner and seller goes into their corner. And you've got to bring them back into the deal. But with a right acquirer, the problems just come up in little puffs, disappear. So there's so much to benefit from finding that right acquirer rather than it just being about the money or about the price.